Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to a very special edition of OpenShift TV. We are going to be having the Konveyor Community Roadmap session today on the air. I'm very pleased to be joined by a lot of folks that are working on the Konveyor project. I'm Chris Short, executive producer of OpenShift TV. If you've never seen me before, check out openshift.tv, the website, and you can learn more. But right now, I'd like to hand it over to Marcus Nagle, who will lead us through this journey.
Yeah, hey, and welcome everyone. Thanks for having me, Chris. Thanks for having us, Chris, actually. So a few words about myself. I'm a senior architect with Red Hat Consulting Services. I'm working out of EMEA in the EMEA solutions practice. And so I'm helping customers migrate to Kubernetes in different variations, like with Forklift, with Crane, as a daily basis. So that's my daily business. So I'm pretty excited to see the roadmap, and I'll walk you through the roadmap session today. Well, we have all the experts, so I'm just a pretty dumb user of the tools, but we have all the experts, and I'd like to share the presentation now.
Beautiful.
Okay. So, as I said, the Konveyor roadmap. So what's up and coming? First of all, if you haven't heard about the Konveyor community, it's a community of people passionate about moving applications and also VMs, infrastructure, everything onto Kubernetes, because we're passionate about Kubernetes. So please join us if you have time. And as a user, I can say, well, I'm not contributing to the core features, for example, but just giving the community some real life experience. So that worked well with the tool, and we encountered this and that, or contributing on the Slack channel. That makes it easier for the community, for the engineers who are actually working on the tools to go in the right direction. So please contribute, share your feedback. That's what I do. Okay, so let's talk about all the tools we have in our portfolio here, in the community portfolio. So first of all, Forklift, if you haven't heard about it, that's a tool that helps you rehosting your virtual machines onto KubeVirt. So you might ask yourselves, okay, what's the point of having a virtual machine in Kubernetes? Well, it's the interesting thing is, it's not only running in Kubernetes, it's administered as a Kubernetes object. So together with your containers, which you can communicate with over the Kubernetes networks, etc. So that's really, there are many good use cases, and I'm using that as part, as I said, of my daily life. Next one is Crane. So if you want to migrate from, let's say, I do that, well, I work at Red Hat, so no big surprise. I'm using that, helping customers migrate from OpenShift 3 to 4, because it's super straightforward doing that. So Crane is the upstream version of the migration toolkit for containers, and it helps us migrate from one Kubernetes cluster to another one. When we talk about application modernization, I forgot to mention that I'm also one of the managers of the Red Hat internal application migration modernization community. So we're using Move to Kube and Tackle quite a lot. So replatforming applications that are, for example, on Docker Swarm or Cloud Foundry onto Kubernetes, that's where Move to Kube comes in. And I already mentioned Tackle. So when we dive into the trenches of migrating and refactoring applications to Kubernetes, that's where Tackle comes in. And Tackle is not just one tool; it's actually a collection of tools that are growing together. So we'll hear about that. And last not least, when we talk to customers, okay, so how do I measure my progress? How do I measure how much better I've become in terms of typical software delivery metrics? That's where Polaris comes in. It can do much more, But typically, what we tell customers, if you want to measure your success, well, define some critical metrics and have a dashboard, and that's where Polaris helps. Okay, so for a quick overview, each of the teams naturally has a detailed timeline, what's coming when. But just to give you a quick overview, I won't go through each of these. As each of the tool owners, community members will talk to that. So I'll first like to start with Forklift. So some of the cool features that I'm really looking forward to use is, like, for example, the pre and post migration hooks, because we sometimes see, okay, so when we move a VM, there's some well, simple work that needs to be done, but when you're doing mass migration, that can become a little cumbersome. So migration hooks are the great solution. Also the upcoming pre-migration checks. But let's have the Forklift team talk about these. So Forklift team, ding ding, where are you?
Hello, I'm Fabien Dupont. I'm part of the Forklift team. I'm the engineering lead for that, and I think Miguel must be close.
Yes. Shall I introduce myself too? So thanks, Fabien. This is Miguel. I'm the product manager for the Forklift team. Do you want to go ahead, Fabien, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, please do it.
Okay, so, well, we have good news. We launched Forklift 2.0. It's finally GA. So what does it come with Forklift 2.0? It can do migrations, of course. As Marcos has just explained, we are moving virtual machines from a source to a target, the target being Kubernetes with KubeVirt. So if you have KubeVirt, you will be able to bring your VMs there. And what we have added as the source initially is VMware vSphere, and we are also doing pre-migration checks of the virtual machines. So before you migrate, we check the configuration of the virtual machine in the source, things like raw device mappings, shared disks, or CPU pinnings, or other configuration that would require some manual intervention is checked, and you're being warned on it, so you could perform some tasks in order to make it migrate properly without finding the issues afterwards. We want you to know where are the risks and where are the possible issues before you figure it out. So this is what it comes with Forklift 2.0 that was launched a couple of weeks ago. And now we are working on Forklift 2.1, and what we're adding is another source to migrate VMs. One of our main targets is to add sources for VM migration. And the source that we're adding is rehabilitation and Overt. So Overt is the upstream project for rehabilitation. And we want to be able to migrate the VMs that are in Overt or rehabilitation to OpenShift and to Kubernetes with KubeVirt. So this is our target. And what else are we adding? Migration hooks. Why? Because sometimes when you want to migrate your VM, that VM requires some, for example, change of IP addressing. So you want to automate that change. And for that, you will need to be able to run tasks before and after migration. What hooks does is it provides a way to be able to run those tasks. So you can provide your own container, and you will be able to run those tasks in the VM. Or for example, if it's attached to a load balancer or it is being monitored, you will be able to deactivate the monitoring while you migrate, so you don't receive 200 warnings in your mobile phone. Could decouple your VM from the load balancer and then reattach to the load balancer once the migration is completed. Next, please. And Forklift 2.2, that's the target for this is the end of the year. And we want to add the warm migration capability that we have right now in migrations from VMware to Overt and rehabilitation. This warm migration capability, what it means is that you can start copying the data is running. So you start copying the data, and whenever you want to migrate, you do what we call the cut over. So you shut down the VM, you copy only the changes that were applied to the disks, and then you can start the VM. And that means two things. First, you do the migration in less time with less downtime. Second, you could migrate more VMs in the same intervention window, so it makes things a lot easier. What else are we adding? Well, we said that we are going to have hooks to run tasks pre and post migration. And it's very likely that you want to build those hooks with Ansible. So we're going to build a feature that will help create the images that you're going to use to run Ansible playbooks with the Ansible hooks image builder, and then attach them to the hooks pre or post migration. This way it will be a lot easier to do, to perform the tasks. And for example, if you are testing them, to make changes to the tasks that you want to run pre or post migration to a migration plan. What else? We will go GA with the pre-migration checks that we already have. And last but not least, we want to do, and this is for the beginning of next year, say February, March, we want to do Forklift 2.3, adding support to migrate VMs from OpenStack, basic support to start migrating VMs from. Did I forget about anything here?
No, I think it's correct. And from an engineering point of view, we have a few side topics around not just migrating the VMs, but helping people to reconfigure the destination platform. Well, kind of migrate the configuration for network, for example, from the source destination, like identifying all the VLANs. Yeah, and things like that, where we would provide some guidance first, and potentially see the traction about automating that. It's not yet on the roadmap because, well, we have a lot to do already with Rev and OpenStack.
Yeah, there's another one. Tell me about Opel.
Oh, yeah, Opel is, I'm not sure we want to use that name. It's used somewhere else, but it's actually an analytics layer on top of the inventory we have. So today we have an inventory of the different source providers, well, and destination too. The way we select the VM is very guided. You need to know which VMs you want to migrate. There's no search in the inventory. So you have to know your source inventory really well before doing a migration, which is fine. Usually you know exactly what you want to migrate. But with Opel, we have a way to explore the data. So your inventory is basically a graph, and we allow you to traverse the graph in many directions. And also it has a search engine to find VMs that are alike. You want to find, as you mentioned, all the VMs that are using a row device mapping, because you know they all need the same kind of pre and post migration hooks. So the idea is to help you find similarities between VMs and create your migration plans from that. And because we have a view over all the providers at the same time, we expect that you're going to have a consistent view on all your VMware and Rev environments and find the same issues everywhere. Sometimes you will just want to do a small change on the source on the configuration of the VM, like you find all the VMs that have a USB drive attached on the source. Of course, we cannot migrate the USB device. So you may just want to go over all these VMs and detach the device because it's not used anymore. Things like that will make your life easier when trying to troubleshoot the migration.
So next, please. So there will be the timeline, right? As I said before, we have launched beta in March. We have launched in June Forklift 2.0. And we plan to launch in August Forklift 2.1 with the Rev call migration and migration hooks. 2.2 in November. By the end of November will be more or less. And then February for the next year for the basic support in Forklift 2.3. So that would be it. Marcus, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for presenting. So pretty excited to hear these things because there's many things, well, we've all been waiting for. and nagging you about it. So for the Crane roadmap, just a few things. Also, I as a user have been waiting for is the namespace mapping. So if you ever moved namespaces from one cluster to another one, and you've had the challenge, okay, so maybe I just want to tweak it a little. Now we can. And also incremental Pve migration. So when we just want to migrate, we have deployed into the new cluster using our CI/CD pipeline, but we just want to deploy the PVs, basically the state of the application, and do that incrementally. So these are some of the highlights that are coming, but I'll leave that to the Crane team to elaborate on that. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. This is John Matthews. I'm an engineering manager related to Crane, and I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. So Crane 1.x, this is an effort we've been working on now for probably about 2 years, and this is approaching a pretty good maturity state. This is an offering for a cluster admin. So Crane 1.x is all for a cluster admin, and it's to help them to migrate stateful workloads between clusters. Next month, in mid-July, we have a release coming out for Crane 1.5, and we have the namespace mapping support in here that Marcus was talking about. And with this, when we do a migration, we're going to allow a user to map the source namespaces to different namespaces on the destination and then be able to adjust during the migration. We've also been continuing to focus on improving the debug experience. Migrations can be quite complex. We're trying to make it easier in case something goes wrong. And there are two highlights I want to call out here. One of them is that we are now emitting more Kubernetes events during the migration to give more transparency of actually what's happening during that workflow. And then on the UI side, we've made a really good improvement of correlating those debug resources with live status and color coding. So you can look at one single thing and get a pretty good feel of what's the state of those resources. Are they in a bad state, and where to put your time? We also are continuing to look into performance improvements. And one that we did for 1.5 is to enable a cache client. Now, this is something that we don't have enabled by default just yet. We think we will put this on by default in a future release. We had a few concerns around memory consumption. So for right now, just to be safe, this is behind a feature flag, but it's there for anybody who wants to use it. Then later, in about late September, we expect the Crane 1.6 release. This release has a technical challenge for us. And one of them is that in Kubernetes 122, it's going to stop serving the V1 Beta 1 version for custom resource definitions. That has an impact to us because we need to exist essentially all the way down to Kubernetes 1.7 through 122 or newer, because we are establishing ourselves as a path to migrate off of these old versions of Kubernetes to the new. So it makes it a little bit harder for us here of how do we handle this so we can coexist with the newer versions as the GVKs change, and then also stay in older versions so we're still compatible. And then for Pve migration, we are extending our support of what we can do. So now we can start to help folks that are using the CI/CD pipeline. With the CI/CD pipeline, we wouldn't need to handle migrating the Kubernetes resources because that's something the CI/CD pipeline would already do. But as far as the Pve data, that's where we could help out for migrating the state, and that's this incremental state-only migration. And then the last piece on 1.6 is that we are improving a detail of the UI, and this is more to help out with a few edge cases on different platforms where it's not possible to change the course headers. In the course headers, this is something that allows the JavaScript code to talk to different backends, different than essentially the route that gave us the actual JS code itself. So this is something that we saw we needed when we were talking IBM Rocks, and we're planning to put that in. And we're planning to use the same approach that Forklift is used. Forklift solved this problem prior to us using their proxy. So we're looking to put that same thing in. We can go to the next one. So Crane 2.0. This is all brand new R&D work that the team is heavily implementing right now and exploring. Crane 2.0 is essentially us taking the lessons learned from the past 2 years and then seeing what can we do better so we can approach migrations. But this time, let's approach a migration from the perspective of an application owner. So a big thing on Crane 2.0 is that you will not have to have cluster admin access to use Crane 2.0. And then the next piece of this is that when we're doing that migration, we want to help end users to embrace the best practices. Essentially, we want to help people so they have repeatable deployment after they use Crane. So we're not just doing it one time and it's done. We want to help them so the setup so in the future migrations are less difficult. And we want to do that through creating an onboarding experience for GitOps. So you can picture that you have an application running on a cluster, and maybe you're not quite sure how that application came to be. You don't know all the pieces of it. You can point Crane 2.0 at that application. We'll discover and export all the resources. Then we'll massage them, make those small little tweaks that are needed sometimes so it can be repeatable and can reuse it. That can be leveraged with Argo CD later to create a GitOps pipeline. Now, as we're building this through a series of small composable tools. We're doing that so we can give more flexibility and visibility to what's happening. And while we're doing that, we're also implementing a pluggable transformation mechanism. This is pretty cool. This gives us the ability to handle small little edge cases that we've learned over the years are needed when we take an export of a resource, then try to reuse it. From this, we can build up a series of knowledge in the space about even doing migrations between different Kubernetes distributions or different vendors. So say that you're going from EKS to AKS, maybe there's a small little tweak that you have to do. We'll have different plugins that can help out for that. Then the last piece I want to mention is that we are approaching PV migrations a little bit different. We're planning to collaborate with upstream project Scribe and then put in some of the features we've had for DVM back into that. This way, everybody can standardize on that one thing for PV migration going forward. And go next. So this is just a kind of summary of where we were. So we're going to have 2 releases coming out over the next few months on the Crane 1.x side. And while we're doing those, there's going to be heavy development going on for Crane 2.0. Crane 2.0, we're looking to have a release probably early next year. And I just wanted to mention that on the Crane 2.0, really heavy development on all of us right now. If there's anyone in the community that has new use cases that you think would be useful, please let us know. Same thing if anybody wants to collaborate. There's a lot of different development potentials here. It's kind of a fun thing that we're looking into. Thank you, Marcus.
And thank you for presenting. So that's pretty exciting. And thanks for sharing the roadmap here. And looking forward to 2.0. So for Tackle, for just a little explanation. So Tackle, as I said, there's many tools growing together. So the Tackle team will talk to that. So we have, like, if you've been following the migration space, application migration specifically for a while. So there's Pathfinder, there's been Windup, now we see Diva and many more features growing together. So one of the features, if you've ever migrated applications and your customer or you as a customer are looking at migrating and assessing a huge number of applications, well, you end up doing things like super advanced, super sophisticated spreadsheets. So no more spreadsheets. So we're getting the application inventory, and that will be the entry point for a number of features. So pretty cool, pretty slick, and I'll just let the Tackle team talk to that.
So hello, everyone. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ramon Roman Nissen. I'm the product manager for the Migration Toolkit for Application, which is going to become the downstream distribution of the Tackle project. So first of all, let's talk about the Tackle MVP. I think we have great news here today. So we basically have our feature freeze in place. So now we have to do some last Q&A just to make sure everything works perfectly. And I think if nothing, especially harmful arises during this last cycle, we will be releasing the first version of the Tackle operator next week, probably on Wednesday. So with this MVP, we will be including the application inventory that Marcus mentioned. And also the Pathfinder application, which is an assessment application that has been around for a while, that was built by Red Hat Consulting. And basically what we have done is to rebuild it from scratch using a consistent UI and have it fully integrated with the application inventory. And we will be also releasing the Tackle controls, which is basically let's say a backend microservice to glue it all together. So that's it for the Tackle MVP. Also, we have mentioned Windup, which is going to become a first-class citizen within the Tackle universe. So we will be contributing Windup to Tackle. And while we do that, we're going to do a few upgrades. So first of all, by the end of next month, I think, we will be releasing a new version of the migration toolkit for applications, including some rules for EAP 7.4, the new version of JBoss EAP. And we will be also adding a new IntelliJ IDE plugin. We had plugins for Eclipse flavors and VS Code flavors. Now we're adding another plugin for IntelliJ. And well, since we have a pretty wide landscape of, let's say, projects and applications and tools within the Tackle umbrella, we are going to create a generic integration layer in Windup to have all these tools integrated within the Windup analysis flow. So that's something we're going to focus once we deliver this first version of Tackle. And once we have created this integration layer, the idea is to have an integration with the application inventory to have a seamless user experience and being able to analyze applications straight from the application inventory. To make the experience, let's say, more cloud native, now that we are delivering this in an operator deployed in OpenShift or in any Kubernetes distribution out there, we want to add some new sources of data to Windup. So make it capable of gathering application source code of binaries right from Git repositories or corporate artifact repositories instead of having to feed them manually to the tool. So that's one thing. And last but not least, we want to explore integration with other migration tooling and technologies. So we will be exploring things like Open Rewrite, Eclipse Transformer, or Rebapi. So once we have this, allow me to introduce you to Jin Xiao from IBM Research. Hi, Jin.
Hey, everybody. Hi, everyone. All right, welcome. Let me have a quick introduction of myself. So I'm Jin Xiao. I'm a researcher and manager at IBM Research. Over the past 2 years or so, IBM Research have actively working on engaging with our enterprise client in understanding what makes application modernization very difficult. So some of you guys may have seen some of the product we releases from IBM recently. So we're leveraging our experiences in applying AI to application analysis and enterprise application modernization into the Tackle domain. So as a first volley of capabilities we're looking at, we want to help developers and architects address the foremost immediate concerns we have observed in our experience. So this leads to 4 really interesting assets we want to talk to you about. So the first work thread is all about understanding the application from a containerization and the technology compatibility and feasibility point of view. Very often when you have a set of applications you're trying to modernize, the immediate question that gets asked is, am I able to containerize the entire application or part of the application? What do I need to consider in terms of the services, the platforms, the data access, and the resources I'm using? And what's my stance in terms, am I able to containerize those or not? So the containerization assessment, it's built all around answering these questions. So we have established a very large knowledge base built by IBM experts that's working with clients on the field that understand the interaction relations of technology. And then we taught our AI components and AI models how to think and reason about these same technology interactions. And as an outcome, we're providing a service that would directly engage with app inventory, as you heard before, to provide that assessment over very large, potentially. By large, we mean we have testing on thousands of applications in one shot to provide that intelligence in terms, okay, these are technology breakdowns. These are how they can interact. This is why they may or may not be containerized. And if you want to containerize, how you might be able to break them down and what sort of different disposition in terms of re-platform, re-hosting, rewriting, or just straight move, you can apply to different parts of application deployment. So this is absolutely a very exciting feature. And in addition, we're looking forward to work with a new tech concept that's coming out of application inventory that will allow you to be able to manage, organize, analyze, and understand your application across different ways, like providing combination filters and tags that's either provided automatically by containerization assessment or being annotated and created by you, the user. Now, the second work threat deal with, as many of you may know, whether you're trying to modernize your application or you're trying to move your application, a foremost concern and question that come about is, I need to be able to understand what configuration, what resource dependencies, and how they're expressed in my application. Now, in particular, we're focusing on Java generation of technology today, namely JEE. Now, JEE have evolved over the past 2 decades and more. And because of that, there's tons of frameworks out there. And depend on the frameworks and services that's used, the expression of where configuration can be done and where it sits in your code and portfolio is actually tremendously varied, as we have found out. So that in the past, we have done a lot of work in terms of creating rules and toolings and templates and models, as some of you may be familiar with, to be able to map from particular artifacts, be it in the code, in your configuration, in your deployment descriptors, in your POM, right, and be able to discover and then hopefully map into a set of configurations you'll be able to rewrite into a new target deployment environment. So here we're applying AI to look at how we might be able to holistically mine and discover these informations at a speed and at a comprehensiveness that's difficult for us to manually cover. So the automated configuration discovery tool look across the entire application code set, meaning both the code, the configuration, the deployment descriptors, and then based on the framework types, try to actually figure out and discover all these configuration services for you. Both help to provide a speed up in your configuration discovery, also serve as a validation to what you may have done manually. Next, please. Thank you. So on the heel of that, another question that's very pertinent to even thinking about modernization is, how about my data dependencies? How is my application and my classes interacting with the databases and related objects, right? So this may seem somewhat manageable when the application size is a handful of classes, right? In the range of tens and maybe 100. But when you're dealing with applications that have literally over 1,000 classes or more, which is unsurprisingly pretty common for a large enterprise application, this sort of interaction, as you can imagine, becomes fairly complex, especially if we have to understand what are the transactional properties of the data access. Transaction is one of the foremost concern in data migration, because when you move from a monolithic application into a microservice deployed architecture, typically you want to be able to either be aware of or transform those transactions into something a little bit more distributed. Essentially, the idea is you want to move from asset to base. And therefore, understanding all these transactions today is actually tremendously difficult. So here, we're applying a combination of both traditional program analysis as well as AI to be able to discover explicit expressions of database access and data tie-ins, i.e. objects to your database tables, in addition, looking at the implicit relationship that's being provided through data transactions and data dependencies. And we also, as Ramon said before, we look to be able to provide you all this information seamlessly. So we'll also look to provide all of these data seamlessly through wind-up integrations. So you have a common place where all these different aspects of your data are manifested. And then finally, we also look at very actively under test-driven modernization. One item we have discovered very much during the modernization journey is, depend on the age and the size of enterprise application. Very often, the test cases themselves are either going out of shape or they have reduced coverage, much less to the degree an enterprise developer would like. Now, it becomes a daunting challenge, especially with a legacy application, to actually be able to increase the test coverage and then find ways to be able to translate these tests into post-modernization tests. If you did any code change or code refactoring, you want to be able to do essentially differential testing in the before and after. And today, that's largely manual-driven and has been fairly difficult and time-consuming. So under the test-driven modernization effort, we're in the first step, which we just released into the community, actually, a set of supporting capabilities that will allow automated test case generation at the unit test case level and be able to provide differential testing both for the before and after, from the monolith to the refactored microservices. Coming shortly towards the end of this year, we're actively working on a set of UI-driven test cases as well. That would not only allow you to be able to create UI-based functional test cases automatically, but also applying AI to automatically annotate what are the nature of the business functionality involved in these UI-based test cases by looking at the manifestation of content and DOMs on your UX, different UX pages and the journey through those UX pages. So we're very, very excited to be able to roll out these capabilities as a part of Tackle solution to really give you a ramp up, a assistant, and a validation on the change work you have to do. All right, next. Thank you.
So I think I have to jump in here to talk about windup, the plans that we have for windup and the application inventory. So last May, we released a new version of windup, including thorntail migration rules towards EAP XP2. That was released under the MTA moniker. There's that. It's already available out there. About the application inventory and Pathfinder, like I told you, we expect to have it released next week, along with the first version of the Tackle operator. This operator will be available on both the upstream operator hub.io to be consumed by any Kubernetes distribution out there, but it will be also available on the OpenShift flavor of operator hub at the same time. So that's it for the upcoming plans in this month. For Q3, we have this challenge of adapting windup to the new situation and landscape that we have. Like I told you before, we will be adding support, some rules to support the migration path towards EAP 7.4, and also this IntelliJ extension. Jean already talked about the different IBM tools that they are contributing to the Tackle project umbrella. This generic integration layer will be targeted at first towards TCD or ACD and Diva, and also to work as an integration point between the application inventory and windup itself. So this is some joint work we will be doing with all the IBM teams, just to design something generic enough that meets everyone's expectations. And that's a very, very, very cool thing. As I told you before, this Git artifact repositories integration will be worked during this Q3. And we will do this migration tooling exploration. We've already had some contacts with the Open Rewrite team. So we're really looking forward to dig deeper into this technology and see how this whole thing could fit within the windup analysis cycle, to not only be able to identify what needs to be changed, but to perform these changes automatically as well. So that's a very cool thing. And finally, by the end of the year, we expect to have this full integration, this seamless user experience between application inventory and windup. And we're already working with, for some other things out there with some GSIs that are showing their interest on Tackle. So lots of very exciting features coming up. So back to you, Gene. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Ramon. Yes, let's have a look at what's on the track in terms of Tackle capabilities. So as of June, right now, we actually, as you can see on the roadmap, we actually have initial rollout in terms of the both the containerization assessment. So we have onboarded and created knowledge graphs specific to the enterprise containerization directly relating to OpenShift that will allow you to do OpenShift migration assessment that has been onboarded. And in fact, we have now a open set of capabilities on the containerization assessment. And for ACD, we have already done the feature set around looking at Spring Boot, how that can be mapped to Quarkus configuration with windup rules. And the Diva, the initial set of database access as well as transaction discovery capabilities has also been released under the Diva branch of Tackle. And finally, the test-driven differential testing in terms of unit tests is to be released, I believe, next week. So we encourage and welcome other communities to trial these new capabilities. And all of these, actually even today, ahead of the windup integration, we also provide ways for you to be able to actually run them standalone. For the purpose, you can give us early beta feedbacks such that it will help us build and prioritize our work going down the line. So very much looking forward to involving you guys on this. Now, going a bit forward into Q3 this year, from a containerization assessment point of view, the integration work is primarily the carry through until the end of the year. So we're looking at integration with app inventory. We're looking at providing better attack exchange and attack creation. And that leads into planning recommendations. That's basically the different dispositions across different application components I alluded to earlier. So those will be provided through APIs that you'll be able to access and manipulate and work with directly from app inventory. Now, on the ACD side, our job is essentially creating more models, more frameworks that will allow us to be able to discover additional frameworks. So our target list is essentially going down the priority, what we have seen in terms of most popular Java frameworks. And with community's involvement input, of course, that's just prioritization we can work with. Essentially, we always try to cater to what the community and our client need is first. So the general target is we'll try to address 4 Java frameworks by end of the year. And on the Diva front, a majority of the initial feature released. So for the rest of the year, we're working on integrations with windup and with app inventory. In addition, we're trying to shore up any of the issues, performance optimizations, as well as additional edge cases we may not have considered in the current Diva release. So from a feature release point of view, we're more or less set for a year. But of course, there's a lot of additional issues and content we have to deal with. Now, in terms of test-driven automation side, we basically have the unit test release. On heel of that, we're providing the differential testing capabilities. And we're currently actually working on the UX test generation, as I mentioned before. And we're hoping, so because this is still an R&D effort at this point, we're hoping we will have a sufficient outcome somewhere between third quarter, end of third quarter, early fourth quarter this year, such that we can actually push that out. And at the same time, we will be working on integration with windup and app inventory, as Ramon said, so that you can access all these capabilities down the future from a single dashboard rather than go through its own individual toolset. All right, thank you. Back to you, Ramon.
Well, thanks, Jin. Thanks, Ramon, for walking us through this. So this is, I'm just blown away. So this is really super exciting. I can't wait to get my hands dirty on all the tools. So thanks.
Absolutely.
For all the work you're putting in there, and that goes to all the teams. I mean, it just this is just a few words. So this is a presentation, what's coming, but you wouldn't know how hard all these teams and communities are working to get this out. So thanks on behalf of all users of all the tools. Thank you. So let's go on to move to Cube. So when you have like already containerized or container ready, let's phrase it like that, applications like, for example, on Cloud Foundry, Docker Swarm, or probably Spring Boot as a language platform. So a couple of features that I'm pretty excited about are the custom templates. So the opportunity to customize our migration efforts on that level. So let's the Move to Cube team talk to that.
Thank you, Marcus. Just kind of give a bit of a preview and then hand over to Ashok to go through a lot of the detail. So, again, Ashok and myself, we're part of the IBM research group. And we started off on Move to Cube a couple of years ago because we saw teams in IBM clients kind of saying, okay, we want to move to Kubernetes. But we never planned that as part of our application development staffing, our project plans. And what they realize is that it's a months-long exercise for a single enterprise app. And you need deep skills in Kubernetes and deep skills in your source platform, whether it's Cloud Foundry or a Java enterprise stack, whatever it is. And you need deep skills in the application itself. So really the question here was, how do I reduce the skill requirement? How do I reduce the cost of migration, bring that months down to a couple of weeks or less? That's what got us going. And then we realized very soon that this is just widely useful. And so we contributed this into the Konveyor community, really looking forward to the community coming around this. And like Marcus said, we really started off by looking at sort of container-ready source platforms like Docker Swarm, Cloud Foundry. What we are realizing is a lot of enterprises out there looking to take small apps maybe that are not container-ready completely, but still want to do a lot of the work to create your Kubernetes deployment artifacts. Maybe you have to do some additional work to tweak your code. But a lot of the extensions in Move to Cube, Ashok is going to talk about around Windows support, for instance, is also addressing those additional type of applications. Another big one that's come up is, how do I have a standard way of doing this? If I'm going to migrate 1,000 applications, I don't want every project team to figure out, how to use Move to Cube and what are my enterprise standards. So I want to set a standard workflow. I want to create templates that everyone can use, and then that further simplifies the job for the for a factory model. So a lot of the customization capabilities and the plugin capabilities allow for that. Whereas a migration architect, I can set those standards and then roll out a factory of migration to my organization. So we are super excited, and with that, Ashok, over to you if you want to walk through this.
Sure, Amit. Thanks for the good preview. As Amit was mentioning, we have been working with a lot of teams who have been trying to get to Kubernetes, and as part of it, all this roadmap is based on the experience that we gather from you, right? So do feel free to give back your inputs to the community so that we can adopt the plan to meet what the community really requires. Looking at the dates, near Feb, we had capabilities around Spring Boot and Windows containers, which we saw a lot of people were requesting for available as plugins to Move to Cube. So Move to Cube, in addition to its core capabilities where it can create all the Kubernetes artifacts, allows for plugins so that you can put in your customizations. You have a new language you need to support, you need not go all the way of understanding the entire Move to Cube. You just need to create a plugin and you can do that. Right now we have support for Spring Boot applications to be containerized and deployed to Kubernetes using plugins. We also have support for Windows containers, which includes .NET 4.x framework and also the .NET Core and .NET 5, which can even run as Linux containers. So Move to Cube is capable of understanding what needs to be containerized which way to run the best in Kubernetes, keeping into consideration your requirements, like enterprise requirements. Moving further, in June, we have a brand new release of MotoCube that has already taken place, MotoCube 2. And we are started working on MotoCube 3, the next version. And if you go to our main branch in Konveyor community, you will notice there is a brand of new framework for MotoCube, which allows for a lot of customizations. Let's say you have a template that you want for your organization, you have a build config in a specific way, or a deployment config that has some specific parameters. MotoCube allows for that. In addition to that, we also realized that every enterprise has their own folder structures. MotoCube used to create a specific structure where the source code is in some folder, and then the additional Docker files go into different folders, and the deployment configs go differently. But as we work with many enterprises, we realize each one has their own standards, and how do you fit that? And that is where the MotoCube's new framework allows for it. It can help you create a template or a plugin or transformer for your application and your enterprise, and you can give it to your thousands of teams who are doing the migration, and it will be much more automatic than before. In addition to that, we are also making more things customizable. Helm charts used to have a few set of values which we standard be parameterized, but now with the new capabilities that are coming in, which will be there in a couple of days or so, we are excited about this because it allows you to create any kind of Helm chart that you want. You have a definition, you say, okay, parameterize in the deployment, parameterize these values and put it as these values in the Helm chart. It will create a Helm chart for you. It will create the customized YAMLs with the same specification, and even OpenShift templates and more. So really excited about seeing that in the community in the near future. And not only that, right, in addition to MotoCube helping you create this artifact, we are also getting you best suited for your requirements, right? And that is what is the key to adoption and a rapid migration. Looking further into Q3, we are looking at getting the Spring Boot capabilities and Windows containers inbuilt into MotoCube, so that you need not even use plugins, and MotoCube will automatically understand that. And the one other interesting feature that is coming up is a Netflix OSS, where we are looking at, okay, you have a Spring Boot application, it has this Zool capabilities, Eureka and stuff. When you go to Kubernetes, how do you map it? How do you map it to the right ingress configuration, the service configuration? MotoCube, with this new framework, which is pluggable, brings in these additional capabilities, which allows you to take each of these artifacts and customize it the way that you want. For example, you take your Zool configuration, how do you map it to your ingress? You take your paint kind, which is now talking to Eureka, how do we change it and make it talk to the Kubernetes services? A lot of exciting things over there. This will really speed up how you can take your Kubernetes Spring Boot application, which is deployed in Cloud Foundry or any other platform, and get it into Kubernetes rapidly. Not only that, we are also looking at supporting more and more platforms where you can run MotoCube. For example, we have an entirely new framework of how these plugin systems work, so that you can just replace one component of it. And there we are going to container-based transformers, which allows you to use any of your languages to write the plugins, right? You want to write your plugin in Python, you want to write it in Golang, you want to write it in your shell script. Does not matter, right? MotoCube will be able to consume all of that and just replace one of its components, and everything else will flow for you. More exciting is the operators that we are looking at. We are putting creating operator for MotoCube, which we will be putting in Operator Hub. And also, as Amit was mentioning, we are looking at the factory model where for your enterprise, how can MotoCube help you create the right templates automatically? Right now, you can do it manually. How do you help create the first, your steering team help create the first template that can be used by your migration teams? Marcus, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and getting into the priorities, as far as the platform priorities, as we talked about, Spring Boot and Netflix OSS are some of the top priorities that we are looking to, and we are trying to bring it natively into MotoCube in addition to the plugins that we have. We have support for Windows containers coming up. And as far as user scenarios, we have the user customization, as much customizations as possible. And as far as the deployment flows are concerned, we are looking at operators so that you can get your application. Right now we use Helm charts. We are also looking at using operators so that the flow is much more streamlined in Kubernetes environment. Not only that, we do support Windows using WSL now. We are also looking at allowing for native support for Windows, where the binary of Mutukube runs natively in your Windows platform. Those are all the updates from Mutukube side. Amit, anything else you would like to add?
You covered it really well, Ashok.
Over to you, Marcus.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for sharing that. That's well, interesting times. So many cool tools, so many cool features. So pretty excited. Before we go to the Q&A, not sure, Chris, I haven't been following the chat. The thing is, as always, in the best open source tradition, if you want to shape the future, just join the community, contribute, and contributions can be as simple as fixing a typo in the documentation or sharing your experience with a tool, providing feedback, because that is invaluable. So please join the team, join the community if you can spare a few minutes of your lifetime contributing. So with that being said, that's about it from the community. Back to you, Chris, or whoever has been watching the various chat channels.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Wonderful roadmap. I'm excited about Konveyor. I really am, to be honest with you. I'm not just saying that because y'all are on or anything. I think it's going to give us a lot of great capabilities, folks. If you have any questions, I mean, we've done a good job of answering the questions in chat via chat. So if there's any other questions you want to ask to get answered live, please ask them now. We have about 3.5 minutes left on the stream, so we can definitely fill that with questions if you got them. But otherwise, I think we're good as far as questions from chat. But if anybody wanted to talk about the kind of migration process, right, with any of these projects, feel free, like common scenarios, use cases, etc.
So I might speak up because that's something customers typically ask me. Okay, so so we have a lot of good technology, cool technology, but actually, how do I put it to work? So what do I have to do, et cetera, et cetera. So summing that up in a few minutes is a little bit of a challenge. That would be one thing we should probably have as a Konveyor meetup, and there's already been some meetups touching these items. But basically, what I suggest to customers in 2 minutes is it's basically the elevator pitch in a high rise. So what do I do? So first, I need to understand the real estate, no matter what kind of migration it is. So I need to get a good understanding of my application or infrastructure in terms of VM's infrastructure landscape, and then obviously make the right decisions, and then do a pilot proof of concept, if you will, and then start with a factory approach. So this is also what the guys mentioned. What we're in the application modernization space, what we're typically doing is we're proving that the principle is valid, and then start a factory approach, because we're not talking about 1 or 2 artifacts, be it an application or a VM or whatever. We're talking about hundreds and thousands. So that needs to be sped up. So well, that was a bit like 1 minute of state the obvious.
Right.
If you've been, but that's basically there's no new rocket science. There's no pixie dust that you spray over your infrastructure and everything happens automatically. There's some things that need to be done, and I think since the question comes up, we should probably cover that in more detail in a Konveyor meetup.
Sounds great. last question, if you have any time, I'm willing to give up a few minutes here. Any exciting like Forklift KubeVirt successes to share? Right, like I know there's like a lot of testing that happens, but has anyone taken the tools and made a big move of any type?
Thanks for the question. So yeah, no, I mean, we have just launched the tool. Okay, but what we've seen so far, there's been a year since KubeVirt reached GA in OpenShift virtualization. So I mean, this is the downstream for KubeVirt, and we already approached a lot of customers in Red Hat, and we have managed to migrate several hundreds of VMs. Wow. But it was a migration done, let's say, manual, like backup and redeploy, backup and redeploy, backup and redeploy. So this showed up that we needed this tool, and it came from our users telling us, look, we need something to streamline these VM migrations. So far, we have already people using KubeVirt in OpenShift in production. And we have already some interesting cases, like, for example, in one aeronautical company, they have a simulator that is pretty old, but is still producing very interesting data that nobody knows where's the code or anything like that. So they put it, they took the VM like that into OpenShift, they coupled it with Tekton pipelines, so they could just spawn as many VMs with that simulator as they want. And they added to the mix Kubeflow, so they could generate a data set to be able to feed machine learning AI analytics. And it was a very successful example of how you can leverage the power of Kubernetes around VMs. So we expect this to happen in the future. When it comes again to the work that we've done in Red Hat, we have started an early access program for customers, and we expect to have some success in the future. Well, crossing my fingers.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's a fantastic use case, success story. That's amazing. So thank you for sharing, Miguel. Appreciate it. Marcus, thank you for leading this effort and kind of pushing through the slides for us. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Any last thoughts, anybody, before we sign off here? No? Okay.
Just a big thank you for having us, Chris.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. It really is my pleasure. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We will be, in about an hour, we'll be starting our OpenShift Commons end user stories. It's going to be kind of a marathon Mystery Science Theater 3000 style watching of various talks, and Diane Mueller and I will be commenting and interjecting here and there. So kind of an experiment for us on the channel, but also should be kind of fun. So please tune in for that. And if this is the last time I see you today, stay safe and have a good weekend out there, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.